Hello, I am Mudita and welcome back to Satisfactory. In the last video, I created a new factory in the swamp. This took many of the parts I've been ramping up production for. I now have 20 pressure conversion cubes per minute, which should be all I need for the save. Today, I'm going to put those on a train and ship them to the Dune Desert, where I will get started on the next adventure. The desert will eventually be home to my nuclear power plant. It will burn all the different fuel rods, which means I'm going to need some Singularity Cells for the Fixonium rods. We are starting here in the desert, where I've already extended my train line, and I have the start of a new train station. And I really wouldn't be too surprised if this ends up getting even bigger. But for now, this is a good start. I've got my personal train station, so I can easily set this as the destination. And then right now, I've just got one other. Because for today, I'm only going to need one train. But eventually, I'm definitely going to need more out here. I've given myself a ton of room to work with down here. There's 7 foundations worth of space. I'm really not sure if I'm going to need all of that space. But because I didn't feel like lowering the train, even though I really probably could have had it drop down just a little bit, I actually don't mind the main train line being a little bit higher. Because the desert is pretty big, and if I take a look at the map, my train station is all the way up here, but there's a ton of resources, all the way on the edges of the map. If I build something out here, which, surprise, surprise, this is where I'm going to be building the factory today. This is a pretty far distance. I'm going to use just a push-pull train. It's not going to join up with the main rail line. It's just going to be going back and forth between this main train station and the new factory. So for trains that are going to stay within the area, those I'll probably try to keep a little bit lower to the ground. And then the main train line will be basically just kind of raised above all the rest of them. And hopefully that'll give the area a cool look. So let me head out to the area of the new factory. I'll clear out the couple spitters and hogs that are out there. This is the one nice thing about the swamp, is none of the enemies are really that difficult to deal with until you get to the cliffs and whatnot. Then you start to run into all the alphas. But the majority of this area is one of the starting locations, and so none of the enemies are all that dangerous. All of the local hogs and spitters have been cleared out. I've got a fresh layer of foundations placed. Let me quickly go through the plan for this factory, and then I'll tell you why I picked this location, which is quite a ways away from everything else I've built. This factory is going to be making some of the Singularity Cells I need for this save. I'm not going to be making all of them, because unfortunately, this is a rather power-intensive process. I'm going to be making 50 Singularity Cells per minute here. All of these will be going to the nuclear power plant. And so on some level, making it this early doesn't make a ton of sense, because I very easily could have made sure that I had my uranium power plants up and running, and then the power for this sort of a factory wouldn't make any difference, because I would have more than enough by the time that it actually got used. So as far as power goes, this would be smarter to build with the rest of my power plant. But I'm trying to break up the power plant at least just a little bit, and so I'm going to take care of this big chunk here, and then we'll get into the other chunks later. The power situation may become a little dicey when I turn on the power plant, but I've got a couple tricks up my sleeve. I think I'll be okay. To make the 50 Singularity Cells, I need a whole bunch of concrete, some iron plates, dark matter crystals, and then 5 nuclear pasta. Thankfully, I don't need to make all 5. I am already producing 1, so I'll be able to put that on a train and send that over here, meaning I only need to make 4 more. I'll be using 4 of the 20 pressure conversion cubes I made in the last video, and then I'll also be bringing in by train some plastic. Everything else is going to come locally. For those local resources, I'm going to need 2,400 copper ore, 2,650 iron ore, and 3,900 limestone. And I almost forgot, 1,200 coal. I'll be using the cloudy diamond alternate recipe to make my diamonds. And then I'll need to bring in 125 reanimated SAM. Even though they're not close, there are some nodes out here in the desert. Unfortunately, I don't have a radar tower out here yet, but if we just ping for those resources real quickly. I've got plenty of iron right here, lots of copper, and some limestone. And then last but not least, the coal. So thankfully, I have all of the resources basically within this area right here. There's one last resource I need, which is water. And that's why I'm building this factory right here. Besides the parts that I'm bringing in by train, I've got everything I need just in this little area. And so if I zoom out a little bit, you can see we're pretty much right in the middle of the desert on the East Coast. And you probably noticed on my spreadsheet, I had things kind of rearranged in a different order. And that's because I kind of played around with where I wanted things, and I just decided to separate it by floor as far as the recipes on the spreadsheet go. And so the bottom floor is going to take care of kind of the basic parts and also the very final product. All right, let's jump into building some machines. So let's go ahead and just start with the very last thing I'm going to need, which are a couple manufacturers. So I may end up changing the spacing around a little bit. I definitely don't need a lot of space back here. So let's give most of it to the rest of the factory. And let's just make sure these are actually centered. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to come back to actually set the recipe because it's the one thing I can't set. I forgot that's a milestone that I still haven't turned in yet. I'm going to place all the rest of the machines first, and then I'll go back to the hub and get that milestone unlocked. Then I can finally set those recipes. The recipe that's going to take the most amount of space is going to be the wet concrete. I need 6 refineries. I don't feel like making a brand new recipe, and I can just use the pure copper because it's got the same components. You need the water, the solid input, it'll have the solid output. You can just change the recipe and the colors. So I just need 3 sets of these. Let's go ahead and place the first one, then go into blueprint mode. I usually use swatch 12 for concrete. Light brown works pretty well. And I just need to switch it to the wet concrete. 1,000 across 6 machines, 166 and 2/3 each. Come back to the belt and pipe work later. Let's get these machines placed. Opposite of the refineries, I'm going to do the smelters for the iron ingots and the assemblers for the iron plates. Because these are such simple setups, I'm just going to go ahead and place these manually. So it's 4 smelters, and I'll give each one their own foundation. This makes the belt work a bit easier. And I need 250. Each one will do 62.5. Belt work for that is going to be pretty easy. Let's go ahead and place the assemblers. Now these, I'm going to go ahead and spin around. I like to space them out just 1 meter. It just makes everything line up in better spots, I think. And I like the spacing. So these will get merged together, and I'm just going to load balance it all like that just for fun. And then those will all come into some splitters over here. So that'll be 250, and then I'll just go straight into there. 62.5 into there, 125 into there. The plastic will get plugged into here, and then these will be my coated iron plates. This is another recipe that I love. You add a little bit of plastic. For every 1 plastic and 5 iron ingots, you get 10 iron plates. It's a great ratio when you really need to crank out the iron plates. And for this, I need 500 across 3 machines. Each one will put out 166 and 2/3. And that's it for this floor. Not too packed, thankfully. The reason the factory is this big is because of the next floor. I already know exactly how much space it needs because I made a blueprint for it, and so it was really easy to measure. Let me get some foundations placed and I'll show you. And we're back. I took care of the real simple belt work. So as we can see, these belts are just going to feed right along here and plug into the stack of splitters for the 2 manufacturers. Going with my normal theme of the highest amount of things are going on the bottom and work my way up. Concrete goes on the bottom since that's 1,000. Iron plates next one up, that's 500. And now we need to work on the last 2. Brings me up to this floor. For this, I came up with a 4 foundry blueprint. So let me just place one real quick. I can use this in the future, but I did make this specifically for this recipe, so I went ahead and set everything. All of the foundries will be set to 200%. They'll each need 100 of copper and iron ore, and put out 200. Even though this stage of the game can be the bane of a lot of Pioneer's existence, I love using this recipe because you get to work with just such even numbers. And now that I have the Mark 6 belts and I can put 1200 on the line, oh, it's beautiful. With these overclocked to 200%, I only need 24. So I'm going to split that in half, and we're going to do 12 and 12. So the ore is going to come up through the middle, and we'll feed them like this. Now I need exactly this much space, so that means eventually I'm going to have to add on an extra so I can actually walk around. Because I do like to move around the factory. Alright, I think that should give it enough space. So we place 1, put it in blueprint mode, 2 and 3. And there's 1 row. And then we get everything spaced out the same on this side. Rinse and repeat. There's my 24 foundries. Now, because this process right here needs 2400 copper and 2400 iron, this is actually really easy because normally I would need a set of splitters in the very beginning, but I actually don't need those at all. I can just put a stack of splitters here, and then each output will feed 1 blueprint, and the initial belts are just going to come right down the very center. And then I'm just going to stack the 2. So whichever one's more convenient, I'll put either the iron or the copper on the bottom and the other one on top. So you've probably noticed that I only have the inputs done for this, and that's because it was easiest to load balance them in groups of 4 like this. Now, one of the things I could have done was do these blueprints in groups of 3, because on this side, that's how I'm going to group them up. So it almost would have made sense, especially because I do like my symmetry, to just do them as groups of 3. And the reason I didn't do that is when you do them in groups of 3, it actually takes up a bit more space on this load balancing side, because you can't put the splitter this close. This splitter is actually going to have to be probably out to right there, because these splitters are going to have to go forward instead of facing each other. And so I was able to keep the load balancing a little bit more compact going this way, as opposed to doing them in sets of 3s. So I load balance them in groups of 4 on this side, but now, because they output 200, I'm going to do them in groups of 3. So we just need a Mark III belt for those 3, and then another one for these 3. So now I'm going to have 4 groups of 3, right? This is 1/2 of this side. And now what I'm going to do is take my constructor, and I'm going to place 2 of them facing in towards each other. And then I've got a merger in the center to bring it together. These constructors are going to be doing the copper powder, and these are also going to be overclocked to 200%, so they'll intake that 600 copper ingots, output 100 copper powder. For this I'll need a Mark V going into the constructor. Let's face the merger the right way. And then I just need a Mark II belt coming out of there. I'm going to even things up. I wasn't quite evened out, but you get the picture. So I just need to copy that 3 more times. But I'm not quite done with this floor. I went back and forth and I thought about putting all of the particle accelerators on one floor, but I need 7 in total in this factory, and so putting them all on the same floor was actually going to be kind of tricky. And in the last video, I added on just a little bit of extra space to do the load balancing that I needed to do. So I'm kind of thinking of doing the same thing, but just adding on the extra machines. Gives me a fun challenge to work around when I get to the decorating phase, and I think it'll look cool having just 4 particle accelerators hanging off the side of the building. Well, not really hanging, but you know what I mean. So the options are, do I want to have it go this way or this way? And this is purely for aesthetics. I like the way that it looks better having the flatter side against the flatter side of the building. Yep, this decision is purely for the looks. I just think that that is going to look better. So let's go ahead and just nudge this into place. And well, I guess we don't need to make it too slammed up against the side of the building. All right, so I need 4 in total for this step. So there's going to be 2 on each side. And let's go ahead and set these recipes. These are going to be making that delicious pasta. Very calorie dense. And these particle accelerators are also going to be overclocked to 200%. Yeah, they're going to use a fair bit of power. That'll take the 200 copper powder from the 2 constructors. Then I just need the 4 pressure conversion cubes, and I'll be bringing in those by train. Right, so obviously I'm going to need to add on just a little bit more. Can't have these big old machines just floating in the air. Yeah, something like that. And then I'll probably just have to snake the belts around. Wow. We'll do it in not a 45-degree angle. Huh. As fun as that is, I think I'm going to try to clean that up a little bit. But copper powder will come into here. Then I'll just have to figure out how to get the pressure conversion cubes in here. But we'll get to that part later. Let's keep building some more machines. Let me go ahead and add the next floor. For now, I've decided to go with iron ore on the bottom and the copper on top. But if I need to change it, I just need to swap the colors around. So I've got the basic belt work done in here. Just a few belts. We got the constructors placed, so they get to feed out to here, plug into there. Eventually I'll need to plug in pressure conversion cubes, but that's just a minor detail. Then the outputs are getting grouped together, and then from here I need to figure out how to group that together, and then they will go downstairs, and those will get plugged into the very top splitter. Which leaves me with one last input, which I would check for you, but I still don't have the recipe unlocked. So I'm just gonna have to tell you, it's the dark matter crystals, and that's what I'll be making up here. If I pull up the codex, we can take a look at the dark matter crystals, and there are 3 different recipes. So sometimes it's actually much easier to not expand it and just use the simple ratios to compare this. So to make the dark matter crystal, all of these are going to take dark matter residue. And if we open that up, the dark matter residue, I'm going to be making it with reanimated SAM. It is a byproduct of a whole bunch of other things, but I'm not going to be making those quite yet. The final phase in recycling, the whole fixonium step, needs a just ton of the dark matter residue, and the byproduct is just not enough. So I'm not going to touch that because I still even need more just for that thing. So I'm going to be making it with the reanimated SAM. So basically all of this to say, if I can cut down on the dark matter residue, I cut down on the amount of SAM that I'm using. We go back to the dark matter crystals. This is 5 to make 1, 10 to make 1, or 5 to make 2. So this is definitely the one that I want to use. Unfortunately, it's also the most involved as far as other pieces. This would just be SAM into the dark matter crystallization. So if you're not worried about how much SAM you're using, this is by far the easiest one. This one's right in the middle. You add some diamonds and you can cut the amount of SAM you need in half. But for this one, I need to take that diamond and turn it into a time crystal. Then I get twice as many. The downside is it does require twice as many diamonds. So this is 30 diamonds per minute, whereas this is 30 time crystals. And to make 30 time crystals, you need 60 diamonds. But because I can make the diamonds out of coal, limestone, oil, there are so many options. I'm really not worried about that step. I much rather save on the SAM. Alright, so right here in the front, I'm going to have 2 particle accelerators. These are going to be doing the cloudy diamonds. And if I completely overclock these, yeah, this factory is going to use some power. It'll intake 600 coal and 1200 limestone and spit out 50 diamonds. So if I'm dealing with completely full Mark 6 belts, that's 1 belt of coal and 2 belts of limestone. Those will then go into some converters, so I need 2 for each one. Go ahead and place 4. And these are going to be making the time crystals. So thankfully the math is real easy on this one. But if you didn't know it for whatever reason, and you just know the input number, you can still do it with the clock speed. I know each particle accelerator is outputting 50 diamonds. So that means this needs to handle 25, right? So if I do 25 divided by the default rate of 12, and then I multiply that by 100 for the percentage, there we go, 208.3 repeating. Each machine will be making 12.5. And we can double check, we've got 25 here, and the numbers look right to me. And I just need one last particle accelerator back here. That'll be doing the dark matter trap. And in total, we'll be making 100. Now I just need to make that 250 dark matter residue. For that, I am going to put another converter just right over here to the side. And the reason I'm doing it on this side is the dark matter residue goes in a pipe. Dark matter residue, and completely overclocked, I only need 1 machine. Now I'm going to need to find 125 reanimated SAM. But like I said, there is some. It's just not that close. It's actually right by the train station. But we'll get to that part later. But now this machine just needs to plug in the reanimated SAM. It'll output the dark matter residue. I've got all my time crystals from the machines in here. Out of the back of this particle accelerator, I'll have my dark matter crystals, and I just need to send those down and into the manufacturers. This factory is going to intake a pretty hefty amount of resources between the copper, the iron, and the limestone. But I'm pretty surprised with how relatively small I was able to make the factory. I am going to pay the price in how much power it's going to consume, but that's a price I'm willing to pay. Before I move on, I want to get all the recipes set. So I'm going to head back to the train station and then take my train back to the hub, and we'll get that last milestone unlocked. Home sweet home. Nothing like the sight of the golden nut and the lovely roar of the waterfall. One of these days I'll unlock drones. But for today, we just want this spatial energy regulation. I can't wait to start using the portals. I never got to it in my last save, so I'm really excited to actually set these up. But that's still a ways off, because unfortunately you need Singularity Cells to power these, and I'm making just enough Singularity Cells for the upcoming power plant. But don't you worry, eventually I'm going to have some portals. But right now, I just need to be able to get this recipe. Thankfully, I have all of this automated, but not the superposition oscillators. So that means it's time for another temporary setup. Time to squeeze another quantum encoder onto the side of my factory. I'm pretty sure that's what... Yep, it's in here. Alright, so what do we need? It's actually pretty easy to deal with. At least for a temporary setup. Well, I definitely want the most bang for my buck, so we are going to sloop it. Now, the question is, can my power grid handle it? I mean, I do have batteries, so it'll definitely be able to handle it for a little while. Oh, well, that's definitely a problem. So if we just do 12? Okay, so it looks like 12 is the most I can do. Still a good amount. It'll still only take a couple minutes to finish this. Thank you, dimensional depots. Now I can just pull out a couple of the stacks of everything I need. And thanks to the last temporary setup I needed, I already have a bunch of dark matter crystals, so I can kickstart this pretty easily. And this will need 300 excited photonic matter, 1 power shard. And now we just grab this. Where is our power? Oh, we've got plenty of space. Now, I do need to deal with the byproduct. I'm not going to be making that many superposition oscillators, so let's just feed them straight into a dimensional depot. And it pretty much instantly shut off, because I needed to take care of that dark matter residue. And to deal with that, we're going to place another particle accelerator. But this one, I just want the nice and simple one. I don't want to deal with the diamonds or the time crystals. Just going to get rid of it to turn it into some more crystals. But even if I completely overclock this, it can only deal with 500. So we're just going to put a buffer in the middle. Into the buffer and into here. So eventually this will work through the whole supply, but I don't feel like placing a second one. And so it'll get the job done eventually. And then I'll just have these crystals go back in the dimensional depot. And so I'll end up with slightly less than what I started with, but I'll have all of the superposition oscillators I need. Well, I definitely hate the way this looks. So don't you worry. This is definitely temporary. I just need to let this run for a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and crank out a few more than the 100 that I need. You really don't need a ton of the superposition oscillators. And eventually I will have them automated. But it would be nice to have a couple extra in my dimensional depot. Back to the way it should be. The temporary setup is all cleaned up. I emptied my pocket of all of my remains, leaves, biomass, slugs, all that jazz. So this whole floor is working away right now. Now I can get that second to last milestone turned in. I can pull out the 100 that I need. I've got 99 left over. Should be plenty for a while. Alright, Ada. Give me that teleportation.
Milestone reached. Instant travel between chosen locations will be possible as soon as the main and satellite portals are built and paired. Do not ask me how it works. Not because I don't understand dimensional dispersal theory and the cross-warp applications of liminal peer-regulated parallel fibrillator nanocells, for example. But because you do not need to know. You go in one end, you come out the other. It's a door. Thankfully, the construction of project part number 12, the ballistic warp drive, can be automated and requires no manual input from you, so I'd say we're relatively safe. If you disagree about my assessment of your capabilities, you are free to attempt a study and replication of either portal or warp technology. After you're done with project assembly.
We'll figure it out one day. Well, now let me go back downstairs, jump in my train, and head back to the Dune Desert. Back at the train station. But using my jetpack to get all the way over there is getting kind of old. And now I can build a train station to take me from here to there. Because honestly, there's going to be a couple things coming from the train, and I really don't want to make that long of a belt highway to go from here all the way to there. That's a little bit farther than I want to do. Plus, I just like to see the trains moving around, so I think that'll be fun. What I think I'm going to do is just extend this area, and then when it comes to this spot right here, just build out. Probably going to need at least 2. And so with this area, I am just going to cut out probably just this whole section, at least for this part right up here. There we go. And I'll just try to work around it, so I won't have a train running through it. I think it probably goes a little too low, although that would be cool. What I'm probably going to do is just have my train station just end right here for this. And make sure that I have at least some space in case I need to use this area for anything. And we'll just center it on a foundation. And since this one's going to be a push-pull, it gives me a reason to use these buffer stops. Alright. I think I'll be able to just use one freight car for everything that's going over there. Especially if it just runs non-stop, because it's the only train on the track, so why not? The distance is pretty short, so it shouldn't have any issue with throughput. I think I can just fit everything in one freight car, and then just use a smart splitter on that end to resplit it up. Yeah, let's do that. So now what I'm going to do is use my ramps, and I'm probably going to go down one section to drop me a few meters, and this is, yeah, I probably don't want to get too much lower than this, or else then I probably have to go back up again to get over a dune, and I'd rather not deal with that. I just wanted to get it fairly low. And then once I'm at this level, now obviously the shortest distance would be just to try to make this go in a straight line. But I also kind of like the idea of this running alongside this track for a bit. So I think even though it'll be a little bit longer, I think I'm going to have this one go straight out for a while. It'll miss those rocks this way. And then once we get out to, I guess, maybe here, maybe I have to go farther. I'll have to play around with it and figure out where exactly I want this to go. But yeah, we'll have it just run along here, and then it'll go out to the factory that way. And we're back. So if I zoom in a little bit, we can see the train line just goes along the other line and then branches off over to the factory. Thank you, good old Blueprints and the Auto Connect. This really only took like 30 minutes to do. And a whole bunch of that was probably just me trying to avoid one rock. So this train is going to need 2 locomotives, one on each end since it's a push-pull. And then we've just got the one freight car in the middle. Now the train station is powered on. Since this is a pretty short section of track and it's mainly straight, so we don't have to worry about any crazy turns, just the one left turn, that this would be just a nice short example to show off this mod. And now that I've got train stations on either end, I can just go ahead and set the self-drive. Of course, I set the wrong one first. Here we go. And there you go. That is the train's interior mod. So if you like that view and you use your trains quite a bit to go from point A to point B and want to switch things up a little bit, I think it's pretty cool. Alright, so now it's a little bit easier to get out here, and I also have power. And I do love my radar towers. Especially when it comes to this sort of thing, it's just so handy. I'm definitely going to be using the pure iron node that is right here. I'm going to be using 2 of the normal coal nodes. I'll be using this pure copper, this impure iron node, this limestone, this copper, and I might be even missing one. I might even need one more node. But just because I do want to make sure that I have them all and I know where they all are, I'm going to go ahead and place the foundations and the miners on all of these nodes, just so they stand out and I can see where everything is. We'll make it a little bit easier when I have to start creating the little belt highways over to the factory. And there are all the miners. Quite a few nodes, and most of them are pure, actually. So the 2 limestone nodes coming from up there probably have the farthest to go. But for most of these, it's a real short trip into the factory. And there's probably a closer iron node. I didn't have to use the one that's way out there. It's just that that's an impure node. But because the iron ore is broken up into 2 parts for this factory, I need full Mark 6 belts, so overclocked Mark 3 miners, to make the copper ingots. The other iron ore is going to be making the iron plates, and I only need 250 for it. So it just feels like a way better use of the node to just go a little bit farther, use the impure node, instead of using a normal or a pure. Even though I know I'm not going to use all the iron in the world, it just feels like I'm better utilizing the resources around me that way. The last of the raw resources that I need is water. And I think I can fit all the water extractors I need in here. So it would be a whole lot easier to just use this lake instead of having to go down there into the ocean. There is tons of water nearby, so it's definitely not a problem. But this is just so much more convenient. So it might be a little bit tricky because some of these spots, it's not quite deep enough, but over here it is. But I think I can fit enough in here. It might also be because of these rocks. Aha! Well, at least I can destroy these ones. So let me get this area cleared up and figure out how exactly I want to do the water. Because I need kind of a weird amount. I need 1,250. It's that extra 50, because of course I needed that extra 50. So at a bare minimum, I would need 3 pipes, but I think I'm just going to use more. So let me finish getting this cleared up, and then let me see how I can fit all my water extractors in here. And this is what I came up with. So a little bit different than my normal setup, and part of that is just how I needed to be able to fit them in here. Now I could have gone with fewer machines. To make 1250 water, I would need at a minimum 4 water extractors. But 4 water extractors into 3 pipes is just not something I want to do. I would much rather keep things simple. And in this case, that means each water extractor just gets its own pipe. If we take a look at the water extractors, each one is overclocked to this kind of random clock speed, and this pretty random amount, the 208.33. But you may remember, if we follow this pipe all the way over here and into the factory, you take a look at each one of these refineries, that is exactly the amount of water that they need. I could have grouped up every 2 water extractors and then sent 1 pipe and then resplit it up between each of the 2 refineries, and I'm sure that would have worked fine. But I'm also very confident that this will work fine. The advantage to using the fewer pipes is you would need fewer pumps. But thankfully, I don't need that much extra head lift here, and so I was able to just use 1 Mark 1 pump for each pipe. And then as far as the inputs go for the limestone, this in total needs 1,500 limestone, so that's not all going to fit on 1 belt. I think it's that one will be bringing in 1,200, and then the other one will be bringing in 300, because that one's only an impure node. And so I could have done the load balancing to take the 200 off of that, and then I would have 1,000, and then I could split it up, because for each of these 2 machines I need 500 to plug into here. Or I could use this cool 2 to 3 load balancer that's using the curve belts that I forgot about until the last video, and I just really felt like using it because I think it looks cool. And that's really where the load balancers shine, is I can take 2 belts of unequal amounts, plug them into here, and it will output 3 completely equal belts. I still need to figure out the belts going from the miners to the factory, but I've got all the miners placed, all the water is sorted out. The next step, which I usually do much sooner, is the train. And in case you're wondering why I didn't just add a junction right there so that I could have that train just directly come here, the reason is not all of the singularities are going to go here. And so I thought it would be easier just to have a main train station and not have any intersections, because the intersections will just unfortunately slow down traffic a little bit. And this way there's no intersections along this whole long stretch, and so it shouldn't add any traffic. Trains should be able to just flow in and out of this area pretty easily. So I'm going to need to set it up so that the train can drop off the singularity cells and the plastic. I'm only going to take 4 of those singularity cells. The other 16 are just going to get sunk over here. But the 4 Singularity cells and the 50 plastic per minute are then going to go along the bottom floor and then plug into this train. This train is also going to need to get the reanimated SAM, but I'll figure that out later. And that is going to bring all 3 of those over to here. And then from here, I'm going to need to add a little bit more space. Alright, so over here is where I'm going to do all my load balancing to get everything down to the right amount. Because I'm going to have the items come out of here, so I'm going to need to use a smart splitter so that I can send the right items into the right directions. And then I'll do all my fun ratio splits to get it down to the correct amounts. Thankfully, things like the plastic, doing 50, that one's going to be nice and easy. Actually, all of these amounts are going to be pretty easy. Some of them just get a little bit bigger than the others. So let's go ahead and start with the plastic because that's going to be easiest. So let's just start with that one over here. Very simple setup. I just need a splitter, another splitter to the left, and then one merger in front of the first one. And we're just working with Mark 1 belts, so 60 into here, using all 3 outputs. You've got 20 on each one. And then we're going to split that 20 in half. There's 10 plus the 20 and 20. Here's my 50. And then this 10 that needs to get looped back. Normally I would have it go right into there, but from the train, that's going to be unloading. And since the train is going to have to get rid of multiple things going in different directions, I'm just going to use Mark 6 belts to make sure that it unloads fast enough. So for this, I'm going to use a lift, and then it can just plug into the top one. As long as I don't let this container get completely full, this will work out fantastic. Next up, the pressure conversion cubes. I need 4 a minute. So let's go ahead and plug the Mark 6 belt into there. And then this split is basically doing 1/15. So we need a splitter and then a 5-way split. So merger and 2 splitters. And then to group all the stuff that we're looping back, we need a merger here and a merger there. Let's plug in the belts. So we're working with the Mark 1. We can multiply all these numbers by 4. So we're splitting this all 3 ways. So there's 20, 20, and for the last 20, we'll just do old stubby to go up and over. And then with this 20, we're doing the 5-way split. So the 20 is then going to become 24. So 12 and 12, 4, and then here's the 4 that needed to loop back. Right here we've got 16. And there's the 56 that needs to get looped back. And added this one is my 4 pressure conversion cubes. Not too bad, right? Well, I saved the longest one for last. So that one is going to go over here. And I think I may even need to push back. Because this one, I almost forgot, is going to be doing the 1 nuclear pasta per minute that I'm bringing in from that one other factory. I'm going to be splitting off 1/60th. Really not too bad. It's basically a line of 3 splitters in a row, a merger, and then 2 splitters. And then I just need a line of mergers to group up the 59. So we have one there. We skip the spot next to that merger, and then just 3 more. Alright, and again, we're just working with the Mark 1 belt. And splitting it all 3 ways. That one's 10 and 10. And then we're splitting in half again. So there's 5 and 5. And then with this 5, this one will become 6. Because we're going to loop this part back. So that way that will be 3 and 3. So there's 1. And there's 4. And the game crashed. Well, let me just skip ahead. And we are back. I finished the belt work for the last one, added a couple signs over here and over there, and then I have everything grouped together to go into the sink. I'm pretty sure this is going to end up changing, but for now this will work great just for testing out the throughput, making sure I don't have any issues here. Now let's head back to that side. Gotta love those buffer stops. I went ahead and did the little bit of belt work I needed between the two train stations. I've got my buffer here on the loading side. And then for Dune Desert 1, I'm just using the first freight platform. We've got the plastic, pressure conversion cubes, and the nuclear pasta coming in here. That's going to come down on this lift and go right into this smart splitter. I have pressure conversion cubes going to the left, undefined, so the other two are going to go to the right. Because I want this to just run as quickly as possible and sort things out where they need to go, I just upgraded all the main belts to Mark V, but since I'm doing the 5-way split and I have to deal with the loop back, this one is going to be Mark VI. And that way this belt will have enough room to deal with the extra bit, and the load balancer will work the way it's supposed to. By siphoning off 1/5, that's my 4 out of the 20, and then that just gets grouped up with everything else again, and then heads on over to the other train station. So this is my system to separate the 4 pressure conversion cubes from the other 16. The other 16 are just headed this way and into a sink. Now that I have the whole unload side of the train done, now I can start going to the different factories and setting up the loading side of the train stations. The first stop is the Eastern Dune Forest. Since I've completely filled my bottom floor with trains, time to start adding to the top. This is where my train is going to pick up the 1 pasta per minute, which is being made in that tower right there. So if we just head down here, I've already got my buffer, but I honestly don't think I really even need it. Now I just need to get that 1 pasta over to here. It's not a far distance, thankfully, and I already have a bit of existing infrastructure here. So I think what I'm going to do is this belt right here isn't actually completely full. This belt only has 476. Obviously, I could upgrade this to Mark V or Mark VI, and there would be plenty of space on the belt. But where's the challenge in that? I want to see if I can do this right, keep this a Mark IV belt, and just see if we can squeeze on 477. And then it'll have iron ore, my fused modular frames, and a turbo motor on there. And so that's what I did. We've got the 1 pasta from upstairs headed down here. And then with the priority merger, it's just going to join up on this belt. So that way, this belt will never slow down. Since there's only 1 pasta per minute, it can sit in this merger until there's an empty space, and that shouldn't be a problem at all. And there it goes. Until it gets to this section where it hits a smart splitter. And then it branches off because this belt continues on into this factory. And the pasta goes into the train station. And then we can see another one in the distance. It just goes on its little journey until it eventually goes into its train. Bean's loving it. And now I will see you when I get over to the West Coast to do the plastic. Back at the West Coast, and it's time to make this train station grow even bigger. The beauty of building just right on top of the water. So I have so much space to do this. 1 new train station. I only need 1 freight platform for this one. And some empty platform catwalks, just to make them all even. This one is going to be loading 50 plastic. So again, just need the small storage container on the loading side. We come up here to the front. I've got 442 plastic and 70 rubber left. It's all being sunk right here. So I could do my load balancing out of this 115 or off that 327, 328, whatever it is. But I think I have an easier plan. That 115 is coming from right here. And the way I'm getting it is I'm working with a Mark II belt. So I've got 120 going into here. And all of this was to siphon off 5 to put back onto this belt. And the rest of it was being sunk. So I can just do a little bit of rearranging right here and really easily get my 50. Let me show you. 120 into here, which means I've got 40, 40, and 40. Right there. That means this belt is 80. And I'm taking that 40 and splitting it in half, so 20 and 20. Meaning this belt right here is 100. And that's what I want to work with. So what I want to do is spin this merger and have it facing this way. So I'm going to replace that. and then I'm going to have it feed into a splitter. So it'll be 100 into here, and then that way I can take 50 of it, put it back into here, and then the other 50 is going to go to the train. So thankfully, pretty easy. So we just got to delete all of these belts. All right. And there's my 50 per minute. So now I can just go through and update my signs. This is no longer 115. Now we've just got 65, and I'll update my one in the very front. Then I'm going to hop back in my train. The last stop on this little tour around my world is in the swamp. Back in the swamp, and I finally get to use my very last train station that I put in here. Chances are this one is going to end up growing, because I have a good feeling that there's going to be more that go from the swamp out to the desert, but for right now, I just need this one freight platform. When I set up the pressure conversion cubes, I already had them sent into the train station, and they were just being sunk right next to that one. And so I just already rerouted them, and now they're just going up into here and into the train. So this was really the easiest to set up. There was just a tiny bit of belt work to do. And it's still chaotic as ever down here. But my copper lines haven't been backing up, so that's good. And when I check, they're still right at 60. So, turns out my system works. Oh yeah, when I rerouted the pasta, I already obviously have my 1,000, and so next time I make it to the hub, I'm just going to put them in a container by the space elevator. But now that I have all of my train stations ready, I can actually set up my train here. Let's go into the timetable. So from here, I think I actually want to set the Dune Desert as the first stop. And then just like a lot of my trains, I'm just going to have it go clockwise because I think the way I've set everything up, that should make traffic run the smoothest. So we'll get the plastic first, plastic and rubber 5. Then we'll have it come down here and go to the Eastern Dune Forest. And then last but not least, out here to the swamp. And that will be its nice loop around the world. Even though the amounts aren't too crazy, it's picking up quite a few different amounts of things. And since they can't kind of stack with each other, I'm just going to go ahead and let it run all the time instead of having it wait anywhere. And here it comes. Out of curiosity, oh yeah, I could definitely have it wait somewhere if I wanted to. Perfect. Working just like it's supposed to. And just in time for the other train to show up. And it looks like everything on this side is working just like it's supposed to. So what I did was I let the train run for a couple cycles so that I could build up at least a little bit of a buffer. Since it takes probably about 10 minutes to make the round trip for the main train, the in-desert biome train going from there to here runs all the time. And so pretty much as soon as it gets dropped off, within a couple minutes, it'll get picked up and brought over here. So as long as these have just a little bit of a buffer, this one doesn't even have a full row. The plastic is just over a full row. But this way it won't have any problem with any of the mergers or anything like that because they aren't anywhere close to being full. And I've got my 1, 4, and 50. Now by doing it this way, this really threw me off because the train unloads all of those pressure conversion cubes and 1/5 come here, but 4/5 get sunk right then and there. And so I'll be steady at 5 or 6, and then that train will drop off its cargo, and it'll shoot up to 65 million. And then it'll drop back down. And that just really confused me the very first time I saw it. I just thought, I didn't understand how I could screw something up in a factory to have this effect. And it took longer than it should have for me to realize that it was because of the way that I set up my train over there. Thankfully, nothing to be worried about. Everything's working just as it should be. Eventually, I'm going to turn the rest of those pressure conversion cubes into more Singularity Cells, and that will even out the points per minute. There's only one minor problem with this whole thing, and it's that I mentioned that I needed this train to bring in one more item, and then I promptly forgot about it for way too long. The main train isn't going to deal with it, but this train also needs to bring over the reanimated SAM. So I'll show you next where I'm going to get it, but it's right by the train station. So it's going to be really easy to put it on that train and get it over to here. But I didn't exactly leave myself a lot of space to do that load balancing, did I? So I'm going to need to figure out how exactly to squeeze that reanimated SAM load balancing in here. And then add another smart splitter. I think there is enough room and it'll all fit, but I definitely could have spaced things out better from the get-go. But that's just a minor detail. Let me show you how I'm dealing with the SAM. Alright, so from my train station, if we come over to here, we've got the river. That right there will take you into that canyon that then takes you to the Spire Coast. So we just want to follow the side of this pillar here. We're just going to stay on this level, and we're going to go right under the arch. We're going to go past that one. And then pretty much just right underneath this one, there's just a little cave. And we're going to head down in here. Alright, and normally there are spiders, but I already cleared them out ahead of time. They're just little guys, thankfully. So we're just going to do the easy solution. Now, here is the problem that I run into. If I completely overclock this, I can get 300 reanimated SAM out of there. The problem is, I need 500. And I'm pretty sure if I ping for SAM, there's more, but it's not that close. There's the resources. So those are the next SAM nodes. Not really close enough that I want to go grab that. Plus it's a normal node, so I would just end up using that one instead of this one. Or what I can do is I can just place one constructor down here. This will be making my reanimated SAM. Fully overclocked, it would intake the 300 and output 75. Now the thing is, it's not really the SAM that I care about. It's the reanimated SAM that I actually need. So what I can do is just sacrifice one more summer sloop, just to make all of this a bit easier on myself. I don't need 150, I actually only need 125. If I really thought that I was going to use every last bit of SAM, I could just do this, do a little bit of load balancing at the train station, and call it a day. The nice thing is if I do need that extra 25, I can always come back there and add the load balancing into that belt. It'll be pretty easy to do if I actually need that. I don't think I'm going to be short 25 reanimated SAM somewhere. So we're just going to make it easier on myself, and we're going to clock this to 62.5. And then when that gets doubled, I'll get the 125 that I need. Now, to get this out of here, you'll notice the cave entrance that I came through is not very big. And I could run the belt through there and then up the cave, or we can go back to cheating. So in this back section of the cave, behind the miner, I think right around here should be the spot. I'm going to place a lift right here. Make sure that its input is facing this way. That way I can take the belt from the constructor, plug it into there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift it way up in the air. And then I'm just going to press H to lock it there. I'm not going to build it because I want to see where it is. So now I'm going to go out. And if I follow this until there's an opening, we go up these rocks, through this little canyon here, and there it is. There's my lift. So in that exact spot, it's going to end up clipping through. So even if I unlock it, I could bring it down a little bit, but still going to be clipping through the rocks a little bit. So maybe I'll lock it in place and nudge it 2 meters that way. Well, that's not so bad. And now I could have it maybe face this way. And if I put some foundations up to that level, so it's just the top of the lift poking out, I don't think that would be too bad at all, actually. And now when I take a foundation and snap it to the world grid, I already know that this is going to be right on that seam. And now we can just fake it just because it looks better. You know, you can barely see it. I know it's there. And there we go. And that's how I can get my reanimated SAM up to here. And the beauty of it coming up right here is there's the train station. Now it really doesn't have too far of a trip to go to get to there. And it needs to plug in. It's right there. So I'm just going to add a merger right before the storage container. And then sort out the minor problem of completely forgetting to build the unload balancer for it. So besides fixing the unload balancers for this train, I need to create my belt highways to get all the materials from the miners into the factories. And then it's run power throughout the factory and the good old decorating phase. The save is currently at about 341 hours and 33 minutes. Let's see how long all this busy work takes me. And welcome back to my new Singularity Cell factory. The save is now at 349 hours and 18 minutes. That busy work took just a little bit longer than I anticipated. But that's okay. I think it was all worth it. I'm really happy with the way this factory came out. Let's take a tour and let me show you all the different things that I added. Just like with all my other tours, we're starting at the farthest point and working our way back to the factory. Got the miner and the constructor creating the reanimated SAM. They head on out of here right through the floor hole. They pop out right here, and then I just needed to do a little bit of curving the belt to get it through the rocks. I went with the small frame pillars to give it a little bit more support. It's not too far, but it felt far enough to where just the belt by itself just looked a little bit funny. They just head along the floor in the train station and into the storage container. And the great thing about having the reanimated SAM being constantly fed into the train station is that means that this train will always have something on its way back. So that way it's not empty on both trips anymore. And I think it's just a better look. That way it's always going to drop something off. Now let's take a look at the miners. I've got the impure limestone right here. It meets up with the pure limestone node. And then they just go together along this little belt highway. And for now, everything is just going into sinks right outside. This is just an easier way to get everything started. I went with an outdoor area for my water extractors instead of enclosing it like I do with everything else. Same layout, I just made everything asphalt, added some patterns and some color. And then with the different height variations, I just started adding stairs in different places, and I actually really like the way that it came out. I added 2 of the floodlights. And if you're curious about the base of it right here, that is not what they normally look like. Normal floodlight base is just like that, which I thought is fine, but I wanted it to be a little bit more sturdy. So I added the train buffer stops. If you hold control, they'll snap right to the edge of it, so I got it lined up perfectly, and then I just nudged them in a few. And then if you do that on all of the sides, you can get that look. It's fun to play around with the different buildables that can clip into each other. This sort of clipping doesn't bother me at all. I like this sort of clipping. The water pipes just head this way and then into the factory. To give it some support, I just use beams. Nice and simple, and I really like the way that it looks right over here, except for you can really only see it if you're pretty much at ground level. But now we all know it's there. Using the fun curve mode, I've got the copper coming up over here. And then it just kind of has to go out and around the pillar a little bit. And for now, it's going into the sink. But eventually, it's going to head through here. And I had to get a little bit creative, and I couldn't get everything to line up quite as well as I liked. I stole this from I'm Kibitz. He did something similar, although he definitely made his look better. Because if you add a conveyor wall hole to the side of the outer corner extension, you'll still be able to see part of the belt on this side. And that just didn't look good to me. So I just covered it with the small concrete pillar, but it doesn't quite line up completely with the conveyor wall hole. It's close and is better than seeing the belt. I'll have to play around with it and see if I can make it just look a little bit better in the future. For these 2 miners, I just went ahead and used the train line. Because they were just close enough, it just kind of made sense, and I could easily run 2 belts underneath the train line. And there's still plenty of space. I could have even fit more. But those just go right underneath the train station, and I'm just using this area underneath it just to rearrange the belts and have them end up where they need to go. The limestone and the copper basically just flip-flop places. And for now, everything is going into sinks. So once this factory is up and running, it'll look a little bit cleaner down here. It'll still be chaotic with a lot of stuff moving around though. And with this side, as you can see, I decided to experiment with using both the straight and the curve mode. I really tried to just use the curve mode, but in some spots like this, it just looked funny doing one curve into another curve, but it wasn't quite the same. And this sort of a thing is still a work in progress. The 1200 coal is coming from 2 normal nodes, so those are just being merged together. And then everything here is getting sent off into the right direction. And then we've got a glorious sushi belt right here that has everything that's coming from the train station. Since I didn't have my logistics area underneath the train station, I decided I would house just that part, but leave the train out in the open. And I kind of like the way that it looks. And if we come in here, we can see what I've changed. Very similar. But like I said, I went with just blueprints for all of these because that was just going to make replacing them and making sure everything fit just so much easier. Thankfully, none of the amounts are that big, and so I wasn't dealing with huge volumes and had to reroute things or have them sync somewhere else in the meantime. It was pretty easy to rearrange this just on the fly. Unlike the aluminum factory where I showed I needed to add a whole bunch of the smart splitters kind of farther down the line so I could start syncing it there. That way I could mess with the load balancers. Over here, it was really easy just to delete it, replace it farther over, and then just reload the storage container with all the materials. So it drops everything off, but then I have everything being load balanced onto the correct amounts, and then that way I can actually use the sushi belt. So this is one of the huge benefits to doing this sort of load balancing right off of the train, is without it, I am not really sure I would be able to use a sushi belt here. That sushi belt just heads right along the front and right into the middle of the factory. But before we get to that, we can go over the outside real quick. This is how I decided to support these random platforms that I threw on the side of it for the particle accelerators. I went with more just boring gray because I just keep using boring gray. And then I went with the kind of limestone brown that I normally use as the accent for over here. Just a line of the big concrete pillars, and these are just barely clipped in. And this right here is a blueprint, and I'll show you why. Instead of the pillar being right at the very corner of the foundation, I decided to have it clip somewhat into it. And so with these windows, I just didn't like the way that this was going to look if I had them right like this, because all of the other ones have this border right on the side, but then it would just be the glass into the pillar. And I just didn't like the way that it looked. And if I nudge it over so that you do have it, then these overlap, but none of the rest of them do. So I don't really like that look either. And this was my compromise. I would just seal the very corner off with beams. But if I place a beam right here, even if I spin it, it's going to be overlapping. So if I nudge it over 1 meter, now I have a gap. Thankfully, we can do the half nudge, and that puts it right here. But that right there is kind of annoying to do. Now I have to do that all over again and keep doing it. And especially if I want to use the shelf beam, I've got to rotate it, nudge it. And if I was going to do that on all 3 floors, all 4 sides, that is a perfect candidate for a blueprint. Because now I can just nudge it all at once into place. And there we go. Sometimes I make things easier for myself. Usually it's the other way around. With the roof, I made a silly decision and I wanted it to overhang just a little bit over these concrete pillars. Because it just makes sense this way. And then I've got a little bit of a gap, so to close that up, I just used basic walls to close the very top off. But that's kind of hard to even notice. So that means this is basically nudged off of where the normal kind of world grid is, which kind of messes up the spacing. So I just worked from the outside and in. So there's just 5 roofs on this side. And then I did the same thing on this side. So we've got 5 on that. And that left this gap right here, which happens to be the exact same size of more big concrete pillars. So the trick to doing these is using the beams. So what I did is place it once down here on the corner, you switch it to freeform mode, and then you place it right here at the top. And you grab the pillar, You snap it to the end of the beam, and then just the good old nudge, because now when I go left or right, it'll travel along the beam. And this one is going to be just a half nudge, so it's nice and even. And then we just page up twice and over. And just down a little bit. Now it's nice and snug. And then I can just delete the beam, and that closes the gap pretty well. So because of the spacing, I had to do that on all 4 sides. And that's basically the pattern that I ended up with. With these right here, I thought it would be nice to have some stairs in these spots in between these pillars. And now we're back into the main part of the factory. Don't worry, that sink is temporary. The iron plates are just going to get started so much faster than everything else and being produced at such a high rate that the manufacturers would just back up pretty quickly. It'll take a little bit longer to create that nuclear pasta. I've been really like running the power along the ground with the beams. I like it because it keeps the power lines pretty minimal and out of the way, but it doesn't make it nearly as hard to work on as when I clip it straight through the machine and onto the ceiling below, or hiding it in the foundations or anything like that. I think it's nice to have the power conveniently accessible. On this side, I have the stairs to come up here. And on this side, I just have little balconies. So on this side, I can come out here and I can see the limestone coming in. And on that side, I can see all of the water coming in. So at least I've got some nice entrances from either side. Here in the front, I've got more glass foundations. And I haven't made one yet because I just now realized it. But I should probably have, a way to get from the train station over to here. I'm not going to do a hypertube from the main train station all the way over here. This train runs nonstop, so really, if I didn't want to run or walk or fly, I just have to wait a minute or two for the train to take me. But I should add some walkway or something from here to there or something. I'll figure that out later. Out here in the front, you can really only tell when you're up close, but I decided to just make a wall out of the construction fences all the way up. That way you can't accidentally fall down here. But once you start getting a distance away, it just kind of has this pattern of where all the squares are. Can't really tell that it's fences though, but that's okay. I still like it. So if I head back inside, over on this side, I've got my elevator. So this is both the start and the final floor. Well, let's go up to the pasta. Not too much has changed. I added the windows, the beams to the side. All of the lifts that were behind those fences just come up to here, and this is where they plug into the factory. So I've got the 2 copper on the outside, the 1 thing of iron. They fit into all of my load balancing. And then we've got 2 more splitters and mergers right up top. So the very top one is the incoming belt, because this one's a splitter. And this is the pressure conversion cubes. Those are going to flow out through each of these. Going straight through the window looked a little funny to me when I added the wall hole. So I added the ramp windows just to create something around it. And the best part about this right here is it just fits just perfectly right through the middle of the 2 machines. There's just a tiny bit of clipping, but the item itself doesn't run into that. That is definitely close enough for me. That comes out through here and then into the splitter, and then that splits into the 2 particle accelerators. I've got more gate holes, so at least I can come out here and see everything moving around. I didn't add any railing, so hopefully nobody falls off. And then the final product just heads along these belts, goes into the merger, and then the pasta will go into that lift. And then it goes into the merger down here. All 4 nuclear pasta will go downstairs and then get fed into the manufacturers. Now we can head up to the dark matter crystal floor. For the roof, I went basically just as high as I needed to get the clearance above the particle accelerators. And then I decided to just use the ramp so that I could kind of bring it in a little bit sooner than having it just be one big square. But it all fits pretty well in here. The limestone and the coal are just coming from outside, where I've got another lift waterfall bringing everything up. And all the rest of this is pretty much the same. So the reanimated SAM is going to come from the very back. It was easiest to send the reanimated SAM up through that corner because it's coming from the very bottom floor. And I do want this to fill up the pipe and everything as soon as possible. But unfortunately, because this is coming in at a rate of 125 per minute, it will eventually back up before that machine gets on to 100%. So I need this smart splitter, but instead, how I normally have them set up, normally I would just have it not go into the machine at all and have everything going into the sink until I'm ready for it. This one is actually kind of the opposite. I want the machine to turn on. I know it's going to back up eventually, so when it does, I'm just going to let the overflow go into the sink. I'll just have to clear out a couple off of this section because this section will be full. But that way the dark matter residue pipe will get completely full, which is how I prefer to deal with fluids. And then that machine will be able to easily stay on at 100%, and this won't have any fluid problems that way. But the major reason I need to do this is because the SAM is coming into the factory on the sushi belt. So if this backs up, it's going to end up backing up all the other things behind it. And that would be kind of a problem for the whole factory. So let's head back downstairs and watch this thing come to life. I don't think I actually showed off the sushi belt part. So the sushi belt comes into the factory and then it plugs into this smart splitter. So I've got plastic going to the left. These are the assemblers creating my iron plates. The pasta goes straight ahead. So that pasta is going to go up and over to here and into a merger. The other lift that's plugged into this merger is coming from the floor above, and that'll have the 4 nuclear pasta. Because it's elevated quite a bit, I went ahead and added some lifts just to make it look a little bit supported, and those go into the top splitter. From there, we've got any undefined, so that means the reanimated SAM and the pressure conversion cubes will head this way. And then from there, pressure conversion cubes go to the left, reanimated SAM goes straight ahead, and that's where the reanimated SAM goes all the way up to the top floor. And the pressure conversion cubes go up and over, and then those just plug into the floor hole right behind the other one. And for now, the final product of the 50 Singularity cells are just going into a sink. Now I think I've covered everything, except for the startup process. And the way this is going to work, I'm going to start with this smart splitter in sync because everything on this belt is on much lower speed than everything else in the factory. Because so many of these are coming in at 1200 parts per minute, they are just going to fly through all their load balancing, and so many of those machines are going to get turned on really quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and then I am just going to slowly select everything that I want to delete, and I'm just going to delete all the rest of the sinks and splitters in one go to get all of the ore sent in. And hopefully I can get that time to where the pressure conversion cubes are already a decent of the way towards these particle accelerators. Or else then they start to back up with the copper powder, and then I gotta clean them out. So it's a little bit easier just to let it wait. So let's boot this thing up. Here we go. Alright, I think I've got that all queued up. And just to double check, let's go up here and see. Alright, so there's one pressure conversion cube. Oh, and there's one on the other side. That's probably far enough along. This is going to start up pretty quick, so you'll see why I was waiting in just a second. Now that I can see that this machine is on at 100%, I can go ahead and get rid of this sink. And we'll just take a couple off the belt. Nice huge buffer. Now that everything else is on and running, I can finally get the last part, the concrete, up and running. And because I knew the dark matter crystal were going to show up a little bit early, I went ahead and added all of this. Now we can delete that. And we can go ahead and send in the iron plates. Oh, look at them go. Exciting little spheres. Actually, only needs to be a Mark 1 belt now that it does have the dark matter crystals on there. And that right there is 50 Singularity Cells automated. Ah, that feels good. And there we go, starting to jump back up. 5 to 9 million. Alright. Well, I guess because of how bursty it is, even on the Mark 1 belt, and we're just going to go from 48 to 52. But as long as whenever I check the machines that are at 100%, I feel pretty confident about this factory. But because of where they're going, I definitely want to keep an eye on it. I'm going to make sure to check this one multiple times. Because hopefully not too long, these are going to be used to make the Fixonium fuel rods. And I want to make sure that any parts of that process are running at 100%, so I just never have to worry about having a nuclear meltdown. Really like to just try to avoid it. I know it's probably good content, but I don't really feel like losing more hair. So I'm going to let this run. Now, I really thought from here I was just going to start building more projects that were directly related to my nuclear power plants. I checked my numbers and it turns out I actually don't have enough aluminum. I need a little bit more to be able to do the power plant. And that will give this factory a good amount of time to run. I'll be able to check back on this afterwards and make sure that it's at 100% still and there's no issues. So my little side project is going to be creating another 3,000 aluminum. I'm currently manufacturing aluminum in 2 locations. This factory right here and in the swamp. And that's because those are built just right next to where the bauxite is. The majority of the bauxite is actually up here in the red jungle bamboo forest area. So in this area, they're kind of a bit spread out and there's more of it. And then kind of off to the side over here, there's 3 nodes. I think there's one right over here, one somewhere over here, and one somewhere over here. Even though this is basically about as far as I could go, I'm going to create a new aluminum plant over here. I'm going to jump in my train and I'm going to head to the west coast because I think that's basically the closest train station. And then I'm going to head up here into the red forest and pick a spot to build a new factory. Here we have the west coast, and if I just turn this way, that's the first bauxite node. And right up here is where I think I'm going to put the factory. I've got a decent amount of space just right next to the bauxite node. And then right up here, I've got a little bit more space. I'm just going to have to clear out these trees, grab that Mercer sphere, and I'll probably just clear up this uranium. It'll just cost me a few extra filters, but it'll be easier just to have it out of the way. Ah, much better. Let's quickly run through the plan. This is probably going to look pretty similar, and a lot of the factory will too. I'll be using my favorite combo of alternate recipes, the sloppy alumina, electrode aluminum scrap, and the pure aluminum ingot. And for the petroleum coke step, I've got a couple different options. I could go down to the west coast and make a little bit more because there's still available oil over there. But instead what I'm going to do is, if we take a look at the map, right here, somewhere over here, there is an oil well that has 1350 total if you completely overclock it. I am going to be turning all of that into petroleum coke, which is going to make way more than I need. I'm going to be making 5,400 petroleum coke. I only need 1,200. And the funny thing is, if I zoom out, this factory down here is actually making an extra 600. Really, I'm only short 600. So in typical me fashion, I'm making over 5,000. But my thinking is, this still might not actually be all the aluminum I need. And if I do need more, the only available bauxite is going to be all concentrated in this area. And I could use other recipes, like use the coal that's out here, or I could just make extra petroleum coke, and then I have it ready. And like I've said in the past, there's a number of other things that I can still use the petroleum coke for in the future. So let me start with getting a base layer of foundations down. I may have gotten a little carried away. I think this might be a little bit bigger of an area than I actually need, but it's a lot easier to just place more, and then I can either space things out a little bit, or I can always cut things down, and the factory will get a little bit smaller by the time I get to the decorating phase. But here is my thinking. This spot down here is going to be my outgoing trains. So I'm probably going to have a train station there, and I don't know how much I'll have to space it out. Probably somewhere around there. So I think I can fit 2 trains easily, and hopefully this is going to be enough space. I want these to be able to fit my normal train size, which would be the locomotive and then 4 freight platforms, which is 10 foundations. If we look on the map, these train lines are pretty close, but obviously they are pretty far. So there's definitely a chance that 2 trains may end up going to the same train station. So I want to give it enough of a gap, just like I did over at that train station. So if I have a second train, it can just wait here and it won't cause any traffic issues. So it does look like I might have to stretch this out 1 more foundation. So I've got a pretty big area up here, and the way I want to lay out the factory is have a train station right here, and it's going to be the one that heads out to get the petroleum coke. The main factory is going to go in this area, and my plan is to just leave this area blank, and that way I can do any of my load balancing and then send it off into the trains. Because I've got a pretty good amount of space right here, I can also add just a logistics floor right on top of the train station pretty easily. So let's go ahead and start with the train station, and I'm just going to have this just all the way up against the edge. And yeah, we'll just give it 1 foundation of space, and we'll use our buffer stop because this is going to be another push-pull. For now, I think I can deal with just 1. I'm going to need to transport 1200 petroleum coke, but thankfully because of the 2 outputs and the Mark 6 belts, I don't think I'll have an issue getting that throughput because the trip shouldn't be too far, especially because this will be a push-pull, so there's never going to be any traffic. This is what I'm thinking. I'm going to have the train line come out to the end here. And now I'm just going to use foundations to kind of try to figure out where exactly I'm going to have this line go. So I'm going to have it go straight, and then at some point we'll have it curve and come out to probably there. And then I'll probably start ramping it up. Well, I may even start ramping it up before then. So this is usually how I plan out my routes. So I just lay it out with foundations first to kind of get an idea of where I want it to go. And because I'm using the blueprints, then I can kind of just count how many foundations and then just cut out the section and then plug in the blueprint. Obviously, I'm going to take the free yellow slug first. And for this, I'll probably keep it pretty small because it's only going to be a single track. I'll just use some of the other blueprints that I've used. And then I'll just find kind of good spots to put these in. And for something like this, normally I would have it run straight down, but that would be really far. So instead, for just these couple sections that are going to be right along the side of this cliff, I'm going to go back to the good old beam. So in diagonal mode, I can make sure that it's kind of staying in this line, right? Freeform would give me completely freeform, but this will kind of at least keep it kind of straight along this axis, hopefully. And so what I want to do is find just a decent spot that I can get this to just kind of plunge right into the rock. I'll probably play around with it a little bit, but something like that. And now I can take the concrete pillar, and what I like to do is snap it to the top, hit H, and then just page down, and then you might have to use the half nudge to find kind of just the right spot where you clip it through, but it's not going to show up through the top part. And we'll place that one there. Now I can erase my beam. And then I just zoop this into the rock to give it a support. This way I don't have to run the support all the way down to the very bottom. Let me mess around with this a little bit, and I'll show you what I come up with. And this is what I settled with. This one, because of the angle, I decided to use the frame ramps. For both of these two, I used that beam trick with the concrete pillars. And then the rest of them, I try to make sure that I can place them just right on top of where the rocks were. And then I didn't have to mess with any of that. And I could just keep the supports rather short. But that did mean when I got to this point, I needed to curve in, because that was just going to be way too long of a stretch. And I could have done more of the diagonal thing to support it onto the side of the cliff, but I just kind of rather do it like this, I think. And it made it easy to avoid this whole rock over here. So they just head on a straight line, and then I'm pretty much right to where the oil is. And here we are. And I'm going to completely overclock it. And it won't show me now, but like I said before, it'll give me 1350 crude oil. Oh, and it looks like this area is relatively flat. Should make things a little bit easier. Just got to get rid of a couple of these rocks. Next up, a whole bunch of foundations. And here's a whole bunch of foundations placed. Let me go over the plan for this section. I'll be taking all 1,350 crude oil and turning it into heavy oil residue. And then that heavy oil residue immediately gets turned into petroleum coke. At 100% clock speed, I would need 45 refineries for each step. Thankfully with power shards, I can bring that down to 18. This section is 23 foundations because I think I need 22 and like a half. So this right here is my middle mark. And we're gonna make this factory fairly compact. Go ahead and place one. I really should have made a blueprint for this, but this should be the last time I'm making petroleum coke. So I'll just do it manually. It'll be fine. And these are gonna be completely overclocked. So for the first step, I just need 8 more on this side. And then 9 on this side. I think I just need 2 foundations worth of space out here. And here in the middle, I really don't need a lot. Let's go ahead and place one. Petroleum coke and completely overclocked. So the only thing I really need to do in this area is one pipe. Make it purple. And then I need to be able to collect all of the polymer resin. So I think I should have enough space. So the way I like to measure it, so that would be at its kind of like default setting, right? So if I grab a merger here and I place it right there. So now I have the option of, do I want this accordion gone or that accordion gone? The benefit of doing it the other way and plugging it into the merger first and then the machine, in this specific spot, it really makes no difference. It really just depends on what look you like better. But for other places, it can give you just a little bit more space to work with on the ground if you need it, because this one gets pushed into the machine. So yeah, that spacing should be just fine. And I just need to spam down a few more refineries. And that's all the machines. I do like when it's nice and easy. One of the best parts about having these completely overclocked is each refinery is going to output 300 petroleum coke. Which means for the most part, I just group up every 4 and I have a full Mark 6 belt. And then at the very end, I'll just have the remaining 2. 1,200 of that is going to go to a train station I'm going to build right here. And that's going to go to the new factory. The other 4,200 petroleum coke is just going to come over to here. And I'm just going to set up some temporary sinks. Because this train station is only ever going to get used for that factory. So if I end up taking this petroleum coke somewhere else, I'm either going to set up a bus because I'm going to build the other aluminum near here. Or I'm going to build another train station on this side, and then I can send it wherever it needs to go. Since this is the 3rd aluminum factory I've built, I'll try to speed this one along. And about 2 hours later, we have this. The train station got a little bit bigger, but I'll go over that in a second. I've got my 4 sinks over here to deal with all the extra petroleum coke. That'll be 3 full 1,200 lines, and then the last one will be 600. I didn't want to have all that smoke on the inside of the factory, so I went with this style of a roof, got a little bit of glass to let some light in, and then just used some ramps to clip into the actual smokestacks, and then some patterns just to kind of switch it up. And on the other side, this is how the oil extractor turned out. Because the pipes really don't have far to go, I decided to just plug them into the factory and plug them into the appropriate amount of machines instead of grouping it up and then just splitting it back up 20 meters later. For this, I used a bunch of the half foundations and then a full foundation to help give it that depth. And then up here, just some double ramps and then some small billboards behind it. So we've got the train, and then we can easily just come right into the factory. And inside of here, nothing much has really changed. Every 4 is grouped up to a full Mark 6 belt. Here in the middle, I've got the line emergers, so that will collect all 900 polymer resin. And right here is where all the pipes come in. Most of those nodes were normal, and so they were able to feed 2 machines. But a couple of them are pure nodes, and so they feed 4. I still need to figure out where that polymer resin is going, but I'm not quite ready to turn on this factory yet anyways, because I actually decided to add on a little bit more. Which you probably already guessed by the 2 blue freight platforms out here. One of the other things I need for the aluminum factory is water. Now, areas like this are really where the recycling the water really pays off. The first step needs 3,000 water per minute, but the second step is going to give me a byproduct of 2,100. So instead of bringing in 3,000 water, I only need to bring in 900. Now, if we come back to where the factory is going to be, I'm going to delete these. These were just temporary. I wanted to get power onto my train station so that I could power on the resource well pressurizer and actually place all of the satellite nodes real quickly. So this has served its purpose. And there is water down here, so I could have just placed my water extractors down here. And it would have probably only taken 1 or 2 pumps. But as I was building things over here, I noticed there is a little pond right here. And I've got a train. Wouldn't it be a fun challenge to use bottled water for no particular reason? And I thought, yeah, I should totally do that. Right down here, I'm going to place a few foundations. And then I'm going to squeeze in just 3 water extractors, because that is all I need. Because if I take a water extractor and I fully overclock it, each one gives me 300. And then as far as packaging goes, if I fully overclock these, each one can package 150. So I'll need 6 packagers in total, 2 for each water extractor. Let me mess around with this and find a layout I like. I've got my water extractors in, and the train station grew a little bit. I was able to just barely fit the 3 water extractors in here. There actually isn't a ton of water, but just enough. And I've trapped a new friend. The water then just goes into 1 Mark 1 pump, and then goes upstairs to the top floor. Each pipe then feeds into the 2 packagers. This will be bringing in 900 empty canisters, and then I've just got the really simple load balancing there. And I have the space, so might as well just do the same thing on this side. This will take the 900 packaged water, and if we head outside the factory, those belts just head right on into the train station. And then I've got my walkway to be able to get me from the train station over to there. So let's go ahead and head on inside. It may need some more walkways on this side, but you know, it's a work in progress. But here's this side of the train station. I clipped the walls just straight through it, so on the outside it looks really good. On the inside, it does look a little bit funny, I will admit. But the only other thing I could think of would be to just add like another layer of wall just to hide it, basically. Like I could have done this just for this inside section, and then, well, I guess even that's too close. Okay, so I would have had to move the wall out to here, and then I could have placed a wall hole. So I could have hid all of this if I really wanted to. But I'll be honest, it just didn't bother me that bad. But if you wanted to do that sort of a thing, and you don't like the way that that looks, that's what I would do. I would just add kind of a fake wall in between. Because on the outside, I think it looks really good. Because it fits really flush with the wall. And I have it this way on both sides, and I'll show you this side, but it's just the loading side for the petroleum coke. And then I just dropped the ceiling down by 1 meter because I had the space, and I like the way that it looks with that little offset in height. But if we come back inside, I've got the really basic load balancing. 1,200 empty canisters per minute will come out of here. We split that in half, so 600 and 600. Split that in half, I'll loop back 300. And then on here, I'll have my 900. And that heads off to the water packagers. The packaged water will just come to this side, and then I just need the small storage container as the buffer. We've got a door here, so I can get up and over, and we can head to the other side. The petroleum coke just goes from the factory into this section. I need 1,200 per minute, and that's all that fits on one belt. Thankfully, with the industrial storage container and it having the 2 outputs and the train station having the 2 inputs, I can still get my 1200, and you can even get more than 1200 per minute as a throughput on trains. But once you get to 1200, or honestly even close to 1200, you're going to need the industrial storage container instead of the small one, which I normally use. I just have 2 last things to take care of before I can get this thing turned on. For the water, I need a whole bunch of canisters. But as we can see my space elevator right there, and just behind it, there's my home factory, which happens to be making some empty canisters. I'm going to go over there and take my entire stockpile because I think it's only 1 small container, and I'll probably end up needing more. I'll need a few thousand canisters in this system to be able to handle it. The other crucial thing that I need for both parts of the factory would be power. Those geothermal generators, not nearly close enough. In fact, because I forgot to delete them, when I load a save, one of my power grid immediately dies and it freaks me out. So I really need to go delete those. I stop having a heart attack when I load up these saves. To get power all the way out there, I'm going to connect this to the main train line. This is definitely going to take a little bit of trial and error. So the way this is going to be laid out is place down some extra foundations, 2 train lines, the incoming and outgoing, and since I have right hand drive, that means the incoming line is going to go all the way around, and then it's going to plug into the back, and then these 2 lines are then going to group up and they're going to head out this way. The reason I don't put it over here, because I really could just place a spiral just straight up off the ground and easily plug it into there. And that's because I already have 2 intersections. In hindsight, I wish I spread them out a little bit farther so that there was probably at least 1 more section of rail in between the 2. I think that would have sped traffic up a little bit. Adding a 3rd intersection to this area just didn't seem like a good idea. Instead, I'm just going to have it slope all the way down, and somewhere over here I can connect it to the main rail line, and I'm hoping that that just works out a little bit smoother in the long run. My new train stations are finally connected. Got power over here. So because of the spacing, this train track gets to go on a little adventure of going inside the train station and then back out to go around the miner and then back in. And this was the least weird looking option I came up with. That's how they get in, and then once they leave, they just get grouped up together here and go on a little journey. And then it just curves down here. And then from here, we just have a really short spiral because it was just going to be really hard to fit this thing in somewhere. I had to get a little creative. Even though it's close, it's not too close, and my train isn't going to clip into that when it runs by. I've just got my simple 3-way intersection, and there we go. Just a short little addition to the train line. It could definitely be smoother, but I'm pretty happy with the way that it turned out. Now I've got power over here, and we can go ahead and get it started. I'm going to go ahead and do these one at a time. Easiest way I could think of to do the startup for this section was to have the oil extractor already turned on, but then the machine's turned off. But I just need to make this power connection, and it'll all come to life. I don't think we need a timer for this one. It's going to get started pretty fast. And just like that, we're already up to 1200. For all the polymer resin, I just added a sink right here onto the very corner. So thankfully, because this is raised up just enough, there's no clipping. It's just right on top of these pipes. In the future, I may find a use for it. If not, we'll just sink it to keep the factory running. And the throughput monitors on this side are looking good as well. And we might as well start this train running. Like I mentioned before, I need a few thousand containers, so I've got 4,800 in this, and then another 2,000 in the train station. And I'll be honest, I don't actually think that's enough. I'm probably going to have to add a little bit more to this. For now, I'll just grab another 500, I'll let that refill, and then I'll probably just add some more later while I'm building the aluminum factory. I want to turn all of these from empty canisters into packaged water. So I'm basically just going to transfer all of these from this side to the other side. What I have on the other side is the same sort of a thing, and then I just don't have this belt connected, just like I don't have here. I'm going to have all of the water waiting at the aluminum side, and then as that gets turned on, they'll get turned into empty canisters, and it'll start the whole loop. But I'm going to start with everything packaged. To get that started, I just need one Mark 6 belt here. And now the water section is turned on. So it's going to deal with a bit of this stuttering up until the entire aluminum factory is up and running. Once the aluminum factory is up and running, all of these canisters are going to be pretty evenly distributed between all different parts of the factory, between the aluminum, the outgoing train, and the incoming train. That is the petroleum coke and the water pretty much taken care of. Now I can go back to the main factory and get that started. And I've already got a big chunk of it taken care of. And here we have the unload side. For now, we're just going to pile up a whole bunch of packaged water, but the petroleum coke is just going to go ahead and sink right away. And now I've got all of this room for some more machines. And as much as I do like to come up with new designs and new things for different projects, this blueprint worked really well for the last one, and I think I'm just going to use it again for this one. So I'm probably going to have to play around with the spacing a little bit, but let's just say probably somewhere around here. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the blueprints. And on this side, I'm going to mirror it. Except for this, I'm going to need a couple more. This side needs 6 of the blueprints. I need 10 in total. That way I have 10 refineries for each of the processes. So let me just run through the blueprint real quickly. Before the refineries, it gets started on the right. This refinery is going to intake the bauxite and water, and the output will be alumina solution. So we've got the water input, and then just a blank input, and I'll figure out where the bauxite's coming from pretty soon here. We've got the alumina solution, just goes straight out, and then into this refinery. This is going to intake that exact amount of alumina solution and some petroleum coke. It'll give me 600 aluminum scrap and 210 water. So if we come to the output side, we've got the scrap that's going to come up and over and then get load balanced across 4 smelters. And then all of the outputs get merged together. Out of this lift will be 300 aluminum scrap. For the byproduct water, this is using the modified VIP junction, which will prioritize the horizontal pipe over the vertical pipe, which is where the packaged water will be coming from. And so you can break this down into really easy systems. Just this one blueprint needs 300 bauxite, 90 water, and 120 petroleum coke, and it'll output 300 aluminum ingots. And then it makes it really easy to place however many you need, because for every impure node you need 1, normal nodes 2, and for each pure node you need 4. So that's why this side has 4. It is going to deal with that node right there, which is a pure node. The other side here has 6. It is going to deal with this pure node, so that'll be the first 4. And then the very last node, we have to go on just a tiny bit of a journey for. But if we come over to this plateau and then this little hole in the ground, there's some bauxite. This one is just a normal node. But thankfully that's not too far of a trip. So for symmetry wise, it would have been nice to do 5 and 5, and originally that's how I tried to do it. But doing all of the belt and pipe work for that just was not convenient at all. So instead I have it split up like this, and the belt and pipe work is a little bit easier this way. The last thing that I need are my packagers. And for this, I did decide to come up with some new blueprints. And the reason for it is because I made these pipes input at such a high level. And that's also because I really like the way that the pipe looks. If you made it shorter, it's just really hard to actually get the 90-degree turn. And so if I place a packager just right in front of it, unfortunately, now they're 2 meters off. And so I could raise it up and have it go over and drop back down, or I could just raise up the packager. Now I have this little guy. Let's go ahead and just place 1, These are 2-meter foundations, and so now this should be at just the right height. Terrific. For this side, I'm going to obviously have to do a little bit of load balancing for the packaged water, but it did allow me to combine 2 of these. So instead of this plugging in right here, I'm actually going to join up every 2 of these blueprints. We'll get that up to the right height, and then these can go in straight mode, plug into there. And now I can place this in the middle. Since each set of refineries needs 90 water, 2 of them together need 180. This is overclocked to 150%. It'll output the 180 water, and the 180 canisters are just going to get all grouped together. And then they are going to end up going into this freight car. So I'm going to end up with 3 of the water extractors on this side. 2 of them are going to be on this side. And then all of the petroleum coke is going to be done here in the middle. And the petroleum coke is actually going to be done in a real similar way, whereas I'm going to group up 2 of the machines. There's 6 sets of blueprints on this side and 4 on this side, so they pair up real nicely. And then I'm just going to have to do the 5-way split here in the middle. And whenever I do something like this, I find it a lot easier just to place some temporary foundations that I know I'm going to delete. So with this, I want them to be at the 2 foundation height, basically. So I'm just going to zoop a whole bunch of these foundations through here. And I use a different material so that afterwards, when I'm done, and I want to make sure that I only delete these foundations, I can use the filter tool. And now I'm only going to delete the fix-it. If I accidentally wave it over here, even though I'm holding control, it's not going to select any of the concrete. I'm not going to select any of these machines that I don't want it to. So if you're going to do something temporary, highly recommend just change either the material or the size. Because if I place 1 meter concrete foundations, it'll have the same effect and I won't accidentally delete the floor below. So I'll use these temporary foundations to be able to help do all of the belt work. And then I'm going to delete them and they'll just be kind of floating above the smelters. And since these blueprints already have stacks or layers of conveyor belts, I feel like it just kind of fits in the theme of the factory. Ta-da! There's a few belts. So I needed to move things just a little bit, but we got everything laid out just the way I said. Let's go through it from the beginning. For the packaged water, it's just building up. Just needs 1 Mark 6 belt right there. Those are going to come along here, through the middle, and then they head into the merger. Because we're doing the 5-way split, there's 5 packagers. This one splits it in half, so we've got the first half that comes over, goes into a splitter, goes into 3 packagers. The other half goes to the other side of the factory, goes into a splitter, goes into these 2 packagers, and the third output of the splitter comes back to the first merger. This other belt right here is the petroleum coke. Looks like I forgot a foundation. There we go. The petroleum coke is going to come along this belt right here. And then this 5-way split is going to be a little bit different. So instead of it going directly into a merger, this one goes into a splitter. So the reason for the difference in the 2 different 5-way splits, this belt only has 900. And the throughput limit for just the standard 5-way split that I use a lot, like this basically layout, the absolute maximum you can do is 1000. 1001 to 1200. Then you're going to have to go with this method. So the 1200 petroleum coke comes into a splitter. That means I've got 600 and 600. Let's work with this 600. That goes into a merger. This is going into a splitter using all 3 outputs. So this is feeding 2 machines. This one is feeding 2 machines. And then this one is going into a splitter. Half of it goes back into this merger. The other half goes into the other merger that feeds the other half, because this splitter feeds those 2, these 2, and those 2. And so if we work backwards, we can kind of make sure that the math is correct. We've got petroleum coke. We need 120 for each machine. 120 on this belt, 240 on this belt, meaning this belt would need 720. And that brings us to this merger, which we already know this is going to have 1200. So I can count on this one and this one having 600. So this belt we know is going to be 120. because we can kind of do the exact same thing on this side. I probably could have explained that in a better way. If you're confused about any of this, or you just want more information on the 5-way split and the whole loopback thing, I have a short video dedicated on exactly how that works and all the math breakdown and everything for it. There should be a little link in the top right for that video. Each set of blueprints is outputting 300 aluminum ingots. I was really hoping that since there's only 4, I could just kind of manifold it in a straight line. This may work, but I'll be honest, I kept it this way. I built the entire factory and I got it started, and it didn't actually quite work out as well as I was hoping. After the factory was up and running for more than 30 minutes, which should be more than enough time for this sort of a thing, the throughput monitors would still drop down to 1199 every once in a while, and there would just kind of be a random gap. And the only thing I could think of was that this very last merger or something just wasn't quite keeping up. I think over a long period of time, I might have just started to see it maybe start to back up. And I couldn't see any of the machines backing up or really any of the belts backing up. And maybe I just needed to give it another 5 minutes and it would have just been fine. But I really felt like it should have just been a solid 1200. And so the manifolds in this situation, I think it's the mergers just can't quite keep up with how fast and bursty everything is. But if you do the same style of load balancing where you just group them in twos, so 2 300 belts to 600 and then 2 600 belts into the 1200, that works out great and I haven't had any issues. So I'll figure out how to squeeze that in this area. And then I just need to run power throughout the whole thing and the good old decorating phase. The save is currently at 359 hours and 18 minutes. I'll be back in a few. Welcome back to the third aluminum factory in the save, which is currently at 363 hours and 25 minutes. I've got the nodes turned on already. I've just got some temporary sinks set up inside the factory with the smart splitters. This one just plugs right into the side of the building. The normal node plugs in right here on the side, but let's go ahead and follow this one back, because this one was probably the most fun to build. Because this one has just the tiniest little hole to go through, and so I messed around with probably too long, but I found just the right height to put the foundations, and you put the belt in curve mode and find just the right spots to place it in. I didn't have any clipping, or at least it's very, very minimal. Nothing on the belts is clipping through anything, which is the important part. But if we head through here, I just laid down a whole bunch of foundations, and here we have the miner. The other pure node is coming from right here. And so since that one needs to go through the train station, figured it would be smartest just to use the ceiling. That runs along the ceiling and then right next to my elevator. So I can go from the train station up to the factory. This just comes up through here and then into the factory. I decided to just leave this as just a big open spot, because most likely this is where my storage containers will go, because I didn't leave myself very much of a gap in between the two train stations. And so I am going to end up using this area, but I'd like to not make it taller than it needs to be. So I'm just going to wait until I actually need this area and then I'll add the roof. For the outside of the factory here, I just went with some Fixit walls and then the steel walls. And then down here, I used a lot of the Fixit ramp foundations. And then a mixture of the half foundations and the curved corners to give myself just one big pillar for the section that seemed to just overhang a bit. I thought it would be more fun than just kind of ramping it in like I normally do with the rocks. So I just kind of created this stuff on the outside, really just to try something new. And the reason for this shape on the roof, where I slanted it in and then went up one more foundation and then had it flat, is because of this section. I just really didn't want it to clip into this if I didn't have to. And so because of this one rock and my poor placement of all the machines and unwillingness to replace them another meter back, that is how we got this entire shape of the roof. And then with the roof, I went with the frame floors so that I could center them around the smokestacks. But because they don't line up completely, they're offset by like 2 meters, I think. If you were to keep the same pattern, that would clip directly through that smokestack. So this side and this side needed their alignment to be offset by 2 meters. So I just have a row of the half foundations to kind of split it up. and then a bunch of the glass foundations where I don't have the smokestacks to help let in some more light. And then this section here in the front was really just, it started off with me wanting to do a diagonal section, and then I couldn't quite figure out how I wanted to actually close it off with walls. And I already knew that I wasn't going to do just a huge stripe of windows all around the factory like I've done with too many of the towers. So instead, I wanted just one big window in the front. And thankfully, this one has a really cool view of the west coast here. You get a nice view of the ocean, and it doesn't even matter how much I pollute this world. I don't think sea levels are rising this high. Inside the factory, I decided to add the glass frame foundations all the way around the outside. Well, almost all the way around. I wasn't going to have them clip straight through the train. So this is a nice spot to either get to the train or down to the ground floor, and then it just does the same thing on the other side. I colored all the temporary sinks pink so that they stand out. And the last real change, like I mentioned, the outputs. So we've got the outside one going into a merger, and then that plugs up with this one. So on this belt, I've got 600, and then I basically have a mirror set up right here. So this one collects this blueprint and the next one over. It's a little bit hard to tell. So we've got that belt, and then this belt. There's 600. So on here, should have no problem getting my 1200. Just snakes through everything else, and then drops back down and off into the sink. And then mirrored thing on this side. This groups up those two. This one groups up two. This takes the two 600s and creates the 1200. And then that one does the same thing. And then this one never has any issues because it's 600 on a 780 belt. Well, now it's time to turn this sucker on. So first step is going to be connecting the water. We'll watch those machines come to life. Once these have run long enough to fill up these pipes, I'm going to go ahead and delete all the rest of the sinks, starting with the petroleum coke, and then I'll do all the bauxite at once. The petroleum coke has a little bit farther and a little bit more load balancing than all the bauxite does. And let's see how long this aluminum factory takes. Now the water extractors are backing up. Go ahead and get the rest of this started. The two 1200 belts are staying solid, and the 600 seems to fluctuate between 599 and 601, which is understandable. There are some gaps on that one. But seeing the nice steady 1200 on the two belts that are supposed to be completely full, it always feels good. But there's one last thing that could still have issues, so I need to let this factory run for a little bit longer just to make sure that it is still running fine. And that is the water. So right now we finally made it so there's no stuttering on this side, but this is still way more packaged water than this storage container is going to end up having. So I need to let this run just a little bit longer and make sure that there's enough canisters in this system for this whole thing to work. As we can see right here, this is only bringing back 1102, which isn't going to be enough because as we can see, this is going to be dropping off almost over 2500. So the canisters just haven't quite evened out across the whole system yet. So let me let this run for just a little bit longer and we'll take a look. The factory's been running for a little while now, and all these numbers are looking good. That one still flickers between 599 and 601. That's okay. We come over to the train. Oh, perfect. So that just emptied, and let's see how much we have. Still plenty in there. So let's just see. All right, and the train is about to arrive. Let's just go ahead and watch this and see how many it ends up with. So about 3.5 stacks is the buffer that I have, and then it starts building up some more again. So now, and I should have actually checked the train, but this outgoing freight car will have just as many empty canisters as this one had brought in, which is just over 2,500. So if I go to the other train station, at any given time, there should be about 2 of those same amounts of freight cars worth of canisters, either empty canisters or packaged. And now all of the canisters are essentially evened out throughout the whole process. And I won't have to deal with that weird stuttering thing because none of these storage containers will ever fill up that much. And this factory should be able to just run. So that is another 3,000 aluminum ingots I can put on a train, send wherever I need. Which for the next video happens to be out in the Dune Desert. I'm going to get started on the main projects for the actual nuclear power plant. Probably not going to be able to squeeze the entire power plant into one video, but with that project, there are a lot of pieces to it, so I'm sure I'll get some of it turned on. Look forward to that, and thanks for watching.